run forward. So, and you can see our guy's kind of just running in place there. And not only that, his animation is very short. So we can loop this just by dragging it out like so. So it's now looping, so he's running in place still, so those guys are going to get away. So we need to move him. And we're going to use his transform track for that, which is his position in the world. So I'm going to go to the transform track, and we'll add a key for his current position by clicking this button here. And we'll come over to the viewport here, we'll scrub forward a little bit, something like this. Then we'll move our guy forward a little bit, something like that. And we can click this button to add another key for the transform, or we can press the S key, which will accomplish the same thing. We'll add a key for his transform, like so. So now what we get is our character kind of running down the street. Now there might be a little bit of sliding in this instance, and you can fine tune this by adjusting this keyframe, how quickly he arrives at that position, his in position. You could smooth it out a little bit better. I think I'll just leave it somewhere in here for now. There you go. Or you could pull it back to make it longer. I think I'll leave it where it was, something like this. If I had more time, I would fine tune this, but you get the idea. So what we want to do now is when he gets to the end here, we want him to blend into a different animation. We're going to have him take an idle and aim shoot pose. So for that, what we'll do is we'll add another animation and then blend between the two. This is something that we just implemented in the latest engine release. So you can blend directly inside of Sequencer as well. So I'm going to come to our character here and I'm going to add another animation, which we'll call idle aim shoot. So we'll give him this animation here. And we'll loop this as well, just by stretching it out like so. And what we should see is that our character is kind of sliding across the screen here, like so. That's because we have these two new properties that were added, these weight properties. So right now they're both set to 1.0, so they're playing both animations at the same time. What we want to do is kind of crossfade between the two so that we're going from our run into our idle aim shoot here. And we can do this inside of Sequencer, just with our keyframes. So I'm going to come over here and we're going to set our idle aim shoot here to 0. And we'll add a key for that. So, and we'll keep our run forward. We'll keep that as 1.0, so I'm going to add a key for that. Then I'll scrub forward a little bit and reverse those. So we'll change this to 0, hitting enter to add a key. And we'll change this to 1.0, hitting enter to add a key. So what we should see now in the viewport is that our character will blend from the run into our shoot pose there. And we could fine tune this a little bit more by moving this transform key a little bit over so that he kind of shifts into position like so. There you go. So our character has no gun in his hand, he's just kind of pointing at people saying that they got away. So we'll give him a gun in a moment. There's one more thing that I want to do to this scene, and that's kind of push the camera in, to kind of zoom in on our character just a little bit to give it a little bit more of an interesting look. Now we could use our transform track, we could physically move the camera forward, but we also have this focal length property that we can adjust as well. So we're going to use that. So I'm going to lock the camera like so, and somewhere around here we're going to keep our current focal length of 35. I'm going to add a keyframe for that. I'm going to scrub forward a little bit like so, somewhere in here. I'm going to just push that in like so. I probably could have moved the guy a little bit more forward, but I think that's fine. So it just gives it a little bit of a punch at the end, kind of like a news feed, somebody zooming in on the action. So the last thing that we're going to do is give our character a gun. So I'm going to uncheck that so that we get control of our camera. Come over here and let's make sure our character is selected. We could drag and drop a mesh into Sequencer and attach our gun through Sequencer. That's generally useful if you want to pick up and drop things during your cinematic. You could control that with keyframes. But I'm going to do it a little bit different. I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way. We're just going to attach it to him. He's never going to actually drop it. So I'm going to come down to the content browser and let's make sure we have our guy selected. I'm going to copy his name real quick just to make this process a little bit easier. And I'll drag a gun into the level. Our gun selected. I'm going to rename this with our character's name and just put gun at the end, like so. So that when I select our character, the gun is right there underneath him. I don't have to hunt and find for the gun. So now that we have it, what we need to do is just drag it and drop it on top, like so. And it's going to ask us if we want to attach it. So I'm going to attach it. When I let go, it's going to ask us, well, where do you want to attach it? We can attach it to any of his bones. This character does have some weapon bones that we can attach it to, which are inside of his hands. So I'm going to attach it to this weapon L here, which is his left hand. Kind of pops into position there, like so. And if we scrub through, our guy's kind of holding the gun there. He's kind of holding it upside down, kind of gangster style, which might be a cool shot in one of our takes. But we'll rotate it just to make it look proper, kind of just rotate it around like so. Hit W to plop it back down, something like that. I think from this distance, I think that will be fine, like that. So something like that. And if we had more time, I would add a particle effect too. But you can see it's attached to his hand as he's firing. All pretty easy stuff there. So what we would do at this point, our cinematic is complete. We'd want to render this out, potentially. We can come to this clapboard icon here. If we click that, it's going to bring up the render movie settings options, which we could render it out as a video sequence. We can render it out as image sequences. We can change the resolution, frame rate. We also could apply some burn-ins to it. If you're any cinematic folks out there working with datas, you can apply the shot information such as time code data, shot name, etc. There's some other options in here that are very well if you're working in post-production stuff like edit decision lists, if you're familiar with that. All of this is covered on our documentation pages if you'd like to know more about the render movie settings options. I'm not actually going to click capture right now because it'll take a few minutes depending on how long your sequence is. I've already clicked capture it and captured the movie out. What I want to do now before we wrap up this session is bring that clip in and hook it up to our TVs in this map here. So I'm going to go to a folder in the content browser, select this one, and let's go down to our folders here, and let's go move that over. So here's our, through the magic of GDC, rendered out video. I'm going to bring this and just drag it and drop it inside the content browser. And let me go ahead and maximize this again. And when we do, it creates this file media source asset. And this is part of our media framework tools. The media framework tools enable you to work with media directly inside the engine, whether that media is packaged with your project, stored locally, or streamed via URL as well. All with our media framework tools. In order to actually play this, though, we're going to need a media player, which we can get to by right-clicking in the content browser, going to Media, and selecting Media Player. And it's going to ask us if we want to associate a sound wave and video texture with it, which we do. So I'm going to select both of those and click OK. And it'll ask us for a name, and I'll just call it our player or something like that. When I hit enter, it's going to create those two assets for us. And the other thing that we need to do is apply, if we select one of our TVs here, we'll need to apply a material using this texture to our TVs. Now you can see in the details panel, we have a couple elements for our materials here. There's our materials section. We have two of them. One of them is for the inner portion of the TV. The other is for the outer rim of the TV. So element 0 is the inner portion. That's the one that we want to apply a material to. To create the material that we'll need, the quickest way to do that is to come down to our texture here, right click on it, and just create a material from it right there. And we'll use the default name. I think that's fine. Now, because this is a media texture, when we created the material, it knows what we need to do. We don't need to go into the material editor to do anything extra. It's all ready to go. So I can apply this material to our TVs now if I select all of our TVs in the outliner. So I'm going to take this material now and just drag and drop it on top of element 0 like so. So all of our TVs should now have that material applied. Now the last thing that we need to do here before we wrap up is a little bit of blueprint scripting so that when we start our game, the media player opens and starts playing that asset. So to do that, I'm going to come to the blueprints button at the top up here, and we're going to open the level blueprint. If you're unfamiliar with Blueprint, Blueprint is our visual node-based scripting language. Highly recommend you check it out, especially if you're not a programmer, because you can do so many things in Blueprint, even if you're not a programmer. So what we need to finish off our sequence here is we need reference to this media player asset. So I'm going to create a variable for that. Come into the variable button here and just calling this our player, like so. I'm going to come over to the details panel and change the variable type because Boolean's not going to help us very much. We'll come down here, we're going to search for a media player. So, and again, we want a reference, so I'm going to select reference. And when I compile that, we're going to see now in the details panel, it's going to say none. So it's going to say what media player asset are we talking about? Because right now it doesn't know. So we can click this drop down and point it to our media player asset just by selecting it there. And if we compile now we have a reference to this asset, which we can control through Blueprint. So I can hold Control, drag this into the graph now that we have a reference to it. And what we're looking to do is, at the start of our game, at the beginning of our game, we want to open this and start playing it. So I can right-click in the graph here and say Begin Play. So we have this node called Event Begin Play, which will fire when the game starts, which is what we want. So I'm going to select that, move that over a little bit. And I'm going to drag off of this, and we're looking to open this now. So we're saying Open Our Source. So you can see it says Target is a media player. So I'm going to connect this up. And the last thing we need to do is specify, well, what media source are we talking about? Well, we're talking about this media source that we imported. And we can select it in the content browser as a quick way of getting to it. We can click this drop down or just click this arrow. Because we have it selected in the content browser, now it knows which one we're talking about. So if I compile now and I play in the editor, fingers crossed, everything should work. So our content is playing on the TVs now. You can hear the audio playing.
We have reports of a disturbance in the downtown area.
So let's take a look at the finished sequence here. Again, this is much more impressive in VR. If you have not experienced this yet, go check it out.
There is nothing to fear. The allegations that our new TAL Series 9 are malfunctioning have not been verified by any reputable source.
And there's our shot there in the sequence. Through the magic of GDC, it's been composited into the video for us.
I'd like to run amok.
You are almost entirely safe. We stake our reputation on it.
Excuse me.
Here you have it. Unconfirmed sources are telling us that the malfunction may be spreading to TAL 9s in other parts of the city. In response, Robo may be issuing a citywide recall. Until the recallers have the situation under control, the one thing you absolutely must do is...
So that's actually it. All of that was done in Sequencer. We did that all through Sequencer. Everything that you just saw, we created our own sequence there. What I want to do now before we close out this session is just quickly recap what we covered here before we close it out. So again, we talked about the Sequencer editor, the power of the shots track, and how you can create your own variants of your shots and create your cinematics entirely through Sequencer. We did create our own sequence in there, as you saw. We worked with some actors, created some animation, worked with cameras as well. We talked about some of the Sequencer best practices, some of the things that we do at Epic, various shortcuts that we use. All of this is covered in our documentation as well. We talked about rendering out sequences, some of the options that are available to you as part of the rendering out process. We used our media framework to get our content up and on our TVs here in the level, and then we used Blueprint Visual Scripting to actually open that source and start playing it when we started our game there. So that's actually going to do it for this session. I really want to thank you guys for sticking around to watch it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to grab me on the side after this session. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you so much.